Some buyers actually feel that sale through assumption is complicated. Actually, the process is very similar to buying a property outright. The difference here, though, is that there is a different document that both the buyer and seller needs to sign, and there's also an extra step. Hey guys, Alex here. Welcome back to my channel, a channel about real estate, personal finance, and business. Today, I will be talking about how to assume a property that is still owned by the developer, meaning the seller has already reserved the property and equity payment is ongoing, or seller has fully paid for the equity but the loan hasn't been taken out of the bank yet. And then within this timeline, the seller decides to sell the property. So what is the process in for sale by assumption, and how do you go about that transaction? So I actually decided to make this vlog because I am in the middle of processing a deal which is for sale by assumption. So it's one of the deals that I'm working on this month. A client of mine contacted me just last month telling me that she wanted to have her 2 studio units in Mesa Verde assumed, and so that's why I'm informed my investors, and one of them came through. So he just finished actually reserving the property, and we will be closing the deal probably next week. So I had to explain the process of the assumption to both the buyer and the seller. So I thought, okay, so why not vlog about it instead, so that next time that I have the same transaction or a similar transaction, then I can just send the video to my client and they can watch it at their own time. It's very convenient for the client. And also, in case you yourself want to have your unit assumed or planning to invest in a unit that's still owned by the developer, so the process will be the same for sale by assumption, then you can watch this video. Some buyers actually feel that sale through assumption is complicated. Actually, the process is very similar to buying a property outright. The difference here, though, is that there is a different document that both the buyer and seller needs to sign, and there's also an extra step because the title is still under the developer. So the deed of sale has to be between the developer and the new buyer. So basically, what the seller does, since the property or the title of the property is still not under him, the seller then assigns his or her rights of the property to the buyer. So based on this document, which is called the deed of assignment, the developer then does redocumentation and then makes a deed of sale between the developer and the buyer. So there is one extra step involved as compared to a transaction wherein the title was already under the seller. So that's more straightforward. So instead of just one document, which is a deed of sale between the buyer and the seller, since the property is still under the developer, what the buyer and the seller will sign is a deed of assignment, and then they will submit it to the developer. The developer will then make a deed of sale between the developer and the new buyer. I have done several transactions like this, and they've all gone smoothly by God's grace. And when it comes to assumption of property, each developer has their own process. So what I will be sharing with you today is the general process of how it's done. So even if you've already watched this video, you will still need to ask the developer what the specifics of their process is, because it can vary a little bit from developer to developer. But before we begin, let me give a quick shout out to Purple Monkey, our sponsor for today. Thank you for sending out these 5 amazing flavors all the way to my house. So I actually have the Milkteas here with me. So they sent me 5 different flavors. First is their signature flavor, ube cream cheese with halaya. And then next we have dark Belgian choco. And then we have salted caramel. And of course, the general favorite, which is winter melon. But this is with a twist. It's a winter melon cheesecake. And then we have matcha Oreo. So they're located on the 2nd floor of the Knights of Columbus building along Captain Vicent Roa Street, just fronting Centrio. So I'm going to be trying out all these flavors at the end of this vlog. So watch till the end to see which is my favorite and which one I recommend. Okay, so let's start. So let's say you've already found a property that you want to assume. The first step is to ask for an updated statement of account or SOA from the developer. So this way you will know how much the remaining equity is and if the seller has incurred any penalties brought about by non-payment of the equity. Developers usually have a penalty fee if you are not up to date with your payments. So once you know the status of the property, you can move forward with having the documents prepared. So now let's go to the second step. So once you have the statement of account and you know what the figures are, then you can agree with seller what your closing price is, and then you can proceed with documentation. So in this instance, there are two closing documents that you need to prepare. First is the deed of assignment and the contract to sell. Since this is a for sale through assumption, instead of a deed of absolute sale, like I mentioned a while ago, you will be signing a deed of assignment between the buyer and the seller. So the DOA basically states that the seller is assigning all rights of this property to the buyer. And then the contract to sell will just then detail all the terms of the sale. And then the third step is meet for closing. Set a meeting between the buyer and the seller to sign the closing documents and then pay the down payment. The buyer will then be the one to continue the equity payment, or if the equity has been fully paid, then the buyer will then proceed to apply for a bank loan on the property. And then step number 4, turn over the deed of assignment and buyer's requirements to the developer. So since the property is still owned by the developer, because they haven't been fully paid by the bank yet, or perhaps they haven't been fully paid with equity payment, then the documents need to be turned over to them, because once the deal is closed, the broker will then give a copy of the notarized deed of assignment as well as the buyer's requirements to the developer so they can do redocumentation. Redocumentation is the transfer of all the documents of the property from the seller to the buyer. So there's usually a redocumentation fee, and the amount varies depending on the developer. Some developers charge 5,000, some 20,000, some even up to 100,000 as redocumentation fee. So it's the developer who makes the deed of absolute sale between them and the buyer, and they will also be the one to do the title transfer. Although some developers do allow the buyer to take out the title and do the transfer themselves. So what are the requirements the buyer needs to prepare? The basic requirements are the following. So you need to, as the buyer, you need to fill up a buyer's information sheet, submit to valid IDs. Some developer asks for 3 specimen signatures with the IDs, but not all. And then TIN verification slip, marriage contract if married, birth certificate if single. So once all these documents are submitted to the developer along with the notarized copy of the deed of assignment, then you just need to wait for the developer to process your account. So another thing you need to consider as well are the expenses that you need to pay. So generally with a deed of assignment transaction, you'll need to consider the redocumentation fee, reservation fee, because some developers require for the new buyer to pay for another reservation fee. And then next is the transfer tax. So this will depend on the developer whether you need to pay for it or not. If the property is not yet fully paid by the bank, then there will no longer be transfer tax incurred because that has already been paid by the previous buyer. But if the property has already been fully paid but is still under the developer's name, then you will need to pay another set of transfer taxes. And then lastly is the notarial fee. So it will depend on the lawyer's tariff. Usually it's about 1% of the total contract price. Okay, so that's it for this vlog. Before we end, let me try all the 5 flavors of this milk tea. Milk tea brand, again, Purple Monkey. So let me try their ube halaya. Okay. This one is the matcha. Matcha cream cheese. And then, oh, I like this one. It's bitter. It's not very sweet. And then next is their winter melon cream cheese. Tastes like the usual winter melon, but I like the cream cheese part. And then last flavor is the salted caramel. So here's the verdict. Out of the 5 flavors that got sent to me, my favorite is this, the matcha with cream cheese and Oreo, because it's the least sweet out of the 5. Because, you know, milk teas are generally very sweet, so usually I get mine with 0 sugar because the powder itself is already very sweet, and I don't really like super sweet dessert. I prefer more bitter, the bitter or sour type of dessert. So I like this. So matcha with Oreo and cream cheese. And I also like this one, Belgian dark choco, because it's also bitter, a bit bitter because of the dark chocolate flavor. And the cream cheese adds like this salty flavor to it. So yeah, this is my favorite. But for those of you who are ube lovers, you know who you are, then you might want to try this one. This is a very unique milk tea flavor. It's ube cream cheese with jalea. Okay, so thanks for spending your time with me today on this vlog. I will see you in my next video. Bye!